Mike Radich here, and I'm now joined on the phone by Jay Dee Witney. Jay Dee is the son of legendary director William Witney. Jay Dee, how are you?
I'm good, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for asking. Is it true that there's no H in your last name because your family couldn't afford it?
Well, that's the family joke. The reason is that, our name is spelled wrong a lot. Mm-hmm. And it's a good comeback when, I have to explain why. So, and people remember that.
Well, your family couldn't have been doing that bad in the 1940s when your dad started working with Roy Rogers, because in some of the credits of those movies, he has an H in his name.
That's correct, and that's where the family joke comes in, to try and get people to remember there's no H in it. And you'll see on his IMDb, too, that he'll be credited with an H in there sometimes.
Today is a very special day because today is the 100th birthday of your father, William Witney. He was born on May 15th, 1915 in Lawton, Oklahoma. Before we start talking about his career, and we're going to talk a whole lot about his career, mainly the westerns he made over the course of his career, whether it was in the Cliffhanger serials, the TV shows, or the movies that he made during his career. But I'm just curious, when I say your father's name, when I say William Witney, what's the first thing that you think about when I say your dad's name? Because obviously people who are listening and myself, we all have our own memories and thoughts about him when we hear his name, or if we see something that he did over the course of his career. But you being his son, it's a lot different. So when I say his name, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Well, Mike, let me back up just a moment here. Mm-hmm. I wanted to correct you on something, and this is something that the family records just showed. Mm-hmm. For years, we celebrated his birthday on the 5th of May, mm-hmm. And then recently, when I started doing his website and other things, looking up on Wikipedia, it said his birthday was the 15th of May. Mm-hmm. So I immediately went, whoa, wow, we must have been celebrating his birthday on the 5th of May, because it was easy to remember, for my mom to remember, being the Cinco de Mayo.
Right.
And then just recently, I found his birth certificate, and it says, born on May 15th at 5:15 in the morning. Then we just discovered that an old family album that his mother wrote down all of the particulars of all the children and everything else, and he was born on May 5th. They made a mistake in the public record. Okay. So I just thought I'd clarify that. But, Dad was Dad to me early on. Quite a few people ask about, what was your father like early on, and I can remember the first, when I was very small. Dad started in the picture business long before I was born. And of course, he met my mother, who was an actress also, Maxine Doyle. And my first inkling of him going to the studio was Mom would get me up and wave goodbye to him through our big picture window as he drove to work. And then, of course, he'd come home after I was in bed, and only spending the weekends with him. Later on, when I, grew a little bit older, he used to take me on the sets, and that was a real time that I remember. And of course, now a lot of people ask me about it, and my memory starts jogging back to this scene and that scene and particular things. And he would take me on the set, especially in the summer times. Of course, when I wasn't in school, when there was an action scene, he wouldn't take me if there wasn't any action going on, because mm-hmm. As a little kid, I'd get bored.
Right.
But, you asked me that question about what do I think about when I hear my dad's name. I feel proud, basically. It's like any son would of his father that was successful.
How close were you with your dad?
I was pretty close to my dad. Mm-hmm. As close as a father is with a son, I think. He took me hunting and fishing and taught me how to handle a weapon and taught me how to box. And so my youth was spent around my dad all the time. Of course, as I got older and left, and I worked in Hollywood for a while myself, and then I went away, and then just recently I'm kind of come back, and I'm trying to get my toes wet again. But no, I was pretty darn close to my dad.
You worked with your dad during the time in his career when he was working a lot on TV and he was directing various TV shows. You worked as someone who played a minor character in an episode of whatever episode he was making at the time, or you played an extra in whatever show, whatever episode he was making at the time. So I'm just curious, what was it like working for him? Because you got to see him on both sides of the fence. You got to see him away from set, and then you got to see him on the set. So what was it like working for your dad?
Well, I was comfortable around Dad because he wouldn't kid around with me. He would be serious, and if you want to hear a little story.
Sure.
I got a call in the afternoon, and it said report to, and I'm trying to remember the studio. I think it was Columbia. Dad was doing some lead-in shots for Daniel Boone series, and the message said, bring your pads. And I thought, oh geez, what's he going to have me do, jump off a cliff or something? Well, it was in the studio and everything. And Dad always had the attitude if he wouldn't make anybody else, especially the stuntmen, do anything that he wouldn't do himself. So this one particular scene I get to the studio, they put me in a costume, a soldier's costume, and I was supposed to run towards the camera, and there was an explosion in the front, and I fell on my knees and towards the camera, dropped the weapon, and fell forward. Well, I forgot to put my knee pads on, and I did that the first time, and when I fell in front of the camera without these knee pads into this sand that was pretty hard, a shock went through my body, and my dad went, "Wow, that was great." And I got up, and I thought I was done, and he says, "Let's do it again." And I said, "Excuse me, can I put my pads on first?"
Right.
Do it again.
Right.
But I never, during working with Dad, I never, you don't complain, you're just serious about the work. And if I got a compliment, I got a compliment. But, basically I was there as an actor working, and that was it. He didn't treat me any differently than any of the other stuntmen or actors or extras or whatever I was doing.
During the time you worked with him, how did he treat you? Did he treat you well? Did he treat you like any other actor? Did he treat you better than the other actors because you were his son? Did he treat you worse because you were his son and he didn't want maybe to make it look like he was giving favoritism? So maybe, because I've had football coaches, baseball coaches, lacrosse coaches, when their son is on the team, and that's basically what the director is. He's the coach when he's making a production. So I've had football coaches, baseball coaches, whatever, whenever their son is on the team, he always ignored that kid or he treated him a little bit worse than all the other kids. So I'm just curious, how did your dad treat you on set when you were making whatever TV show and working with him?
He did come down. If you want to hear another story,
sure, go ahead.
He did kind of come. He didn't come really down on me hard on this, mm-hmm. but we were out doing I don't know if you remember the Hondo series or have seen the Hondo series. It's of course mm-hmm. a long time ago, but
right.
We were out in the desert out in Palmdale, and we had this running scene with all the soldiers, and they. This is back when, in the morning, you'd be one of the cavalry, in the afternoon, you'd be an Indian, and they'd always stick me in the back because I had blue eyes. So
right.
There are no blue-eyed Indians. Anyway, all of a sudden they said, "Mount up, the director wants to do this running shot and everything." And so I went and I grabbed my pony, and on the back I went and everything, and we did this running shot. Well, I forgot to check the cinch. We were in such a rush that I didn't check the cinch on the horse, and we're doing this running thing over the mountain, and all of a sudden my saddle starts to slip, and of course these saddles were real like cavalry saddles. They were two pieces of wood that you rode on,
right.
basically, and this thing went underneath the horse, and I was in the back, and I was able to keep the horse, and then they said, cut it, and the horse took off as the saddle went under, and of course the Wrangler started chasing me. I went off I heard my dad goes, "Who the hell is that out there?" the other riders and everything, and says, "We won't tell your dad. We won't tell your dad." But he knew. I told him later on who it was. And
was he someone who shared his feelings? Was he someone who, if he didn't like what was going on, he let you know? Or was he someone who kept his feelings bottled up and he had a lot of secrets? What kind of guy was he in that regard? Was he someone who told you how he felt, or was he someone who was private and kept to himself?
He was very openly spoken, and anybody that ever knew him, he said his mind. Mm-hmm. He didn't let anything back. If he didn't like something or he wanted to change something, he was very outspoken.
Now, I'm very curious about this. Of the well-known Western actors that he worked with over the course of his career, who were his friends? Who were some of his close friends that are recognizable names that we would know that he worked with on some of the Westerns that he made?
Well, we had a lot of them. Rex and Bonnie Allen, mm-hmm. Slim Pickens, and his wife. Let me think here a minute. Jim Davis was another one. Was a very close friend. His family were close. The Leif Erikson family were really close friends. I know that you had talked to and interviewed Don Moore, mm-hmm. Clayton, although I don't remember him ever coming over to the house, but they used to ride by the horses all the time, and they didn't live too far from us, and they were always stopping and chatting with my dad, Clayton, and whoever else was with him. I'm trying to some of the names, but you might want to throw some at me, and I could tell you yes or no.
Right.
But those were Roy and Dale,
of course,
Rogers. They were, they were a very close family.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Over and visit all the time. So I had, it really as a young kid, I didn't think about it much when I was a young kid, but nowadays I think back and go, wow, we had a pretty good celebrity mix coming over to the house on Sunday afternoons,
One actor that I'm really interested to hear about, and since you said throw out a name, I'm a very big fan of this guy. So, Roy Barcroft, was he close with your dad at all? He worked with him a lot of times.
Roy, yeah. Well, they were good friends. My dad was friends. As far as being really close friends, I don't remember Roy ever coming over to the house. But then again, I was a young kid, so it could have been. But Obviously, I met Roy Barcroft. He was always very nice to me on the set. Usually the guys that were the heavies were
right.
really nice.
Right. That's what I've heard. I've heard that Roy Barcroft was the nicest guy in the business, even though he was Republic's #1 bad guy.
Yeah, he was a really nice guy. Another one that just comes to mind, and of course he was the big stuntman, Davy Sharp. Davy was very close, our family.
How did he meet your mom? Because the story I heard was they worked together on SOS Coast Guard, and he went up to her and he asked her out, and the rest is history. But there's got to be a better story than that one. Is there a better story? Was it love at first sight? Was it something where he had to work hard to win her heart? Give me something. Is there a better story than the one that you can find on the internet?
There is a very interesting story to it. As a matter of fact, it's in its book. My mom was one of the Hollywood starlets that signed with MGM early on in the 30s, along with Olivia de Havilland, and there's a few others that were there too. But she got, let's say, farmed out to Republic, I guess, Studios as a contract player, and she was hired to play this gal in SOS Coast Guard. Order gal, and I wish that my dad tells the story really good in his book, but my mom didn't think much of the when he directed it with my godfather actually was Jack English, the other director. And Dad was shooting first, I guess, and shot the scene where she had to go in this water. It was one of the first scenes that they shot for the serial, and my mom came in and everything out of makeup, and he asked my mom to get in the water, and she said, well, is it warm, is it cold, and everything, and my dad says, get the hell in the water and do your scene. And so he kind of, I don't want to say he pushed her in the water, but made her get in this cold water, do the scene with Ralph Byrd. Ralph Byrd actually was another very good friend of the family, too. As a matter of fact, his wife ended up being my godmother. But anyway, back to SOS Coast Guard and my mom. My mom ended up slapping my dad when she got out of the water. Just kind of making this story short here. And it was towards the end of the production that he asked my mom out to kind of smooth things out because there was a lot of friction on the set. They got married a year later. So that's the story. It wasn't a love at first sight beginning, let's put it that way.
Okay. I see. I was just curious about that because all I ever heard was they just met on the set of SOS Coast Guard and nothing goes further into details. So I'm glad there's a real good story behind it.
Oh, there's quite a story actually. So
your dad's nickname for you is Knothead. Why is that the nickname that he gave to you?
Well, when I was a young boy, he used to call me Knothead because some of the things a young boy does. It was just a nickname that he gave me that I got used to. I know he was kidding around and so on and so forth, and that's about all I can say about that. It was just how somebody calls you a name and it kind of sticks, and every once in a while I'd do something stupid and he'd say, hey, Knothead, come on. And actually he used to call me Knothead on the set too, so it wasn't it wasn't confined to the house.
Changing gears a little bit, JD, let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to Lawton, Oklahoma, back in 1915. Maybe you know this, maybe you don't know this, maybe he shared this with you, or maybe he didn't share this with you, but what was his childhood like? What was his family like? Did you ever meet his parents? Did he have any brothers or sisters? What was his childhood like growing up?
I never got to meet my grandmother. His father died when he was really young. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be doing a little bit of, I'm going to do a tribute to him. I was going to try and get it out on the 15th and explain the birthday thing, but I'm shooting for Father's Day. I'm putting together a little video tribute. And we just found this family album with some pictures that nobody has seen and so on and so forth. He had two older sisters. He was born in Lawton, Oklahoma. His dad was a dry merchant, my grandfather, and that's about all I know there. When he became older, he went to live with his Uncle Lou, who was a captain in the Army at Fort Sam Houston. And his mom and his two older sisters moved out here to California, to Coronado. He grew up on a cavalry post, riding horses, and learned how to ride and learned how to jump horses. He played football in high school at Houston, at Fort Sam Houston High School. He moved out here to California, where he finished high school at Coronado. He did play some football, but he injured his knee, and he had a plate in his knee till the day he died from playing football. But he was a damn good horseman and a swimmer and sailor. He knew how to sail. When he, I've got to think here for a minute, right out of high school, he went to, he was going to take the entrance exam for Annapolis. He got an appointment to take the entrance exam, and while studying for that entrance exam, he went to live with his father-in-law, Bert Clark, who was a producer. His middle sister had married a producer and lived in Hollywood, and so while he was down studying in L.A., he was living at their house, and my Uncle Bert Clark asked him if he'd like to go and do some extra work for a shoot that he was doing. And that's basically how Dad got started. He started as an extra. And then he was offered a temporary job as a errand boy at the studio. And there's more to the story in that, but that's basically how he started. He started as an errand boy and worked his way up to the cutting room, and then from the cutting room out into directing. And there's a whole other story there too, but it would take too long to tell right at the moment. You have to go all the way back to the old Mascot Studios.
Right.
It became Republic.
Right.
And that's how he ended up at Republic, basically. I mean, the old Mascot Studios, which originally he went to work for, I'm just going to say became Republic. And there are a lot of aficionados out there that are probably going to hear this and go, "Oh, no, this happened and this happened and this happened." But in the short of it, that's how he ended up at Republic.
And now I've heard it's a very fascinating story how he got his first job being a director. How did that happen? What went wrong to allow him to step in?
Well, he being, when you're in the cutting room, you're actually a director. You take all this footage. Of course, you're working with a script too, so everything should fall into place. But then, they say, since I do quite a bit of editing myself, the editing part is never done. There's always something you can make better, something you can do, some little cut, some little insert to make the film more interesting. But he was keeping script and doing some cutting on this I think it was Painted Stallion, and gosh, I'd have to look that one up. I'm pretty sure it's Painted Stallion. And he was sent with the crew out to keep script, and they one of the directors, the main director, drank too much.
Right.
And they asked Dad to take his place because they sent the other director home. I'm not going to name his name, but they sent the other director home. And Dad said, "Gee, I'll do this, but I'll do it till you get a replacement." And they liked what Dad shot, and it was all done on budget and on time. And so they asked him to stay on, and he actually got the major credit for the film. And so that's how he became a director. Again, this is all in his book, In a Door, Into a Fight, Out a Door, Into a Chase, is the book that he wrote. And all of this history. Thank goodness he wrote this book, because it's all documented.
Now, maybe you know this, or maybe you don't know this, but what did he want to be when he grew up? Because from what I can gather, it wasn't to be a film director, because you just said that he wanted to go to the Naval Academy in Annapolis, and if that happens, I gotta assume that his film career doesn't happen. So what did he want to be when he grew up?
Would have been a military career, because he had his older sister was married to a colonel in the Marine Corps. Coming from living with his Uncle Lou, who grew up on a military base, Fort Sam Houston, he was looking towards a military career. He did end up to have a little bit of that military career, because he went in the Marine Corps during World War II for a time. But the war ended, and then he was obviously sent home without the injury.
Now, when Republic inherits him from Mascot, and he starts working on cliffhanger serials, how does he get teamed up with your godfather, John English? How does that all come together?
Again, it's all in the book. But when they shot the serials in the old days, one director would prep, and the other, and then the next day he would shoot. And they do this back to back. So they did these serials in such a small period of time, and they cranked these things out. And they always used to have two directors, and Jack English was the one that just teamed up with him, and the two hit it off. They could read each other's minds, so it worked real well. Mm-hmm. Exactly how they exactly how they got together, I really can't tell you, because I'd have to go back and read the book.
Between your father, William Witney, and your godfather, John English, who was Batman and who was Robin? And what I mean by that is, who was the main guy and who was the sidekick between the two of them?
Well, Dad was the kind of the rough and tough, wore jeans and a light shirt and jodhpur boots to work, and drove a pickup truck. And Jack was very neat, with white shoes and slacks and a tie and a nice neat mustache, and was very, very well presented. If you took the two and put them side by side, they didn't match at all, but they worked together really well, and of course they were obviously good friends.
My favorite cereal that your dad made is also my favorite cereal of all time, regardless of who the director was. My favorite cereal ever is Zorro's Fighting Legion, because it's got action, it's got a great story, it's got mystery with the viewer not knowing who Dandaloro is until the final chapter. It also has just the feeling of a big movie. It feels like an A feature with all the extras and all the sets. It just looks like a massive production, and it's a beautifully shot serial. It's the best example, I think. It's the best example of what a serial should be, and it's all wrapped up into Zorro's Fighting Legion. So that is my favorite serial of all time. So I'm just curious, what's your favorite serial that your dad made? And also, what's his favorite cereal that he made?
Oh, wow. Well, Daredevils of the Red Circle is one of my favorite ones. Of the cereals, I think, I've heard him, because people send me these. I have a gentleman, I'm going to mention his name, Bill Sasser, that has sent me these clips that I'm editing and putting them on from the film festivals back in Nashville. And Perils of Nyoka, I think, was one of his favorite serials that he talks about. Mm. He never mentioned to me about what was his favorite cereal. He loved action. He loved to shoot action, and that was his big thing. Was shooting action, and that's where he and Jack kind of differed in a way. He would shoot the action scenes, and Jack would do the interiors and the love scenes and that kind of genre.
Did they work side by side? Because their work, it's brilliant. It seems like, even though there's two directors, it seems like there's one director. It's very in sync with one another. Both guys really mesh well with each other, and obviously that's why their work is so great, because it just makes sense. It just fits very well together. Did they ever work side by side when they made these serials?
They would. They would work side by side if they were doing some pickup shots, or Jack or my dad would get together and say, "Gee, what do you think about that?" And I know that at times they were on the set together. One of them might have been shooting and one of them might have been prepping, and come over to watch and see what was going on, because he was going to pick up and do the next scene. When you're working that close together, you're working side by side, even though you're not maybe on the set together.
I'm just curious, how often have you went back and looked at his work, and also when was the last time you sat down and watched something he made, whether it was a serial, a movie, a TV show?
I'm watching it all the time. As a matter of fact, I just did a presentation about him at the Lone Pine Film Festival last October, and Stranger at My Door was one of his favorites, and so I've watched it several times. As a matter of fact, I took some cuts, because it's a very famous scene about a wild horse in that he shot, that he took several days to shoot. And but I'm constantly looking at clips and stuff that he's done. This website that I have for him has kind of opened the door for a lot of. I have his fans from all over the world contact me and send me pictures and ask me questions. and what do you think about this, and what do you think about that? And I've got to go back and look at some of this stuff, because I've seen a lot of them, but I don't remember. And it wasn't something that growing up that I rushed to the theater and watch and remember. So I think more notably, probably the TV shows like Bonanza and those sorts are ones that I really remember, especially the ones I worked on. So
when you go to film festivals and when you get feedback on your website and when you talk to his fans, what is he best known for? Is it a particular serial? Is it a TV show that he did? Is it a movie that he made? When you get around his fans and you hear them talk about your dad, what is he best known for?
I think that he's known for his action scenes, known for his horse scenes, because he was a horseman himself, and so he enjoyed working with the stuntman. And so, as I said before, action was his thing. He is more noted for developing several techniques in the industry. Early on, when they used to shoot fights, going back to the serial days, or before the serial days, actually, they would just shoot a master of a bunch of guys fighting each other. And so one day, he and Jack went over to visit the Busby Berkeley set. They were shooting, and he is the one with the chorus girls,
Right.
And what they were doing over there is they'd shoot a couple of dancers, and then they'd shoot a whole line of dancers, and then they'd shoot these two dancers. And anyway, they were cutting the scenes and going from a master to a cut. And Dad said to Jack, and of course this is documented in his book too. He says, I wonder if we can do this with fight scenes. And that's where the fight scenes goes, where you have somebody slugging somebody in the face, and all of a sudden you cut back and everybody else is fighting, and then you cut to this guy breaking a chair over somebody's head, and then you cut to another guy punching and going through a wall. I mean, those are he's notably noted for those fight sequences. Of course, for his running, I could always tell one of my dad's pictures if I saw a running horse's head or a running stagecoach, and those kinds of things. And just the way he did it, nobody else really did it that way. And of course, now it's been copied, refined, but that's basically what he's noted for.
Are Westerns his favorite genre to make, or was there another genre that he liked better?
Well, he did so many Westerns, I don't think he really had a favorite. Of course, he did so many that you would think that it would be his favorite. He was more comfortable working with Westerns, probably anything else. But he did it, as you know, he went off and did a few other things. Mm-hmm. Right. It would be surprising to me when he'd come home and he'd say, I'm doing a Lassie. I'd go, what? There's no action in Lassie. I mean,
right.
other than the dogs,
Right.
But and he'd come. It's funny because he'd come home and he'd go, "Have you seen so and so?" And I go, "Well, yeah. It's a pretty good show." And he says, "Well, I got to watch one because I'm doing one next week."
Right. Why did your dad and Jack English, obviously the world knows him as John English, but you've said it a couple times, his name was Jack. So Jack English and your dad, I'm just curious, why did they stop working together? Because there was a point in time where your dad was still making cliffhanger serials at Republic, but he was either making them on his own or he was teamed up with another director. So I'm just curious, why did they stop working together?
Well, unfortunately, it just kind of happened. It wasn't through any kind of disagreement or anything. They were very good friends. When Dad came back from the war, of course the serials and the Rogers and stuff had ended, and they basically. And I believe Jack moved on to Columbia. I'd have to see there again. some of the gurus out there, which I am not a motion picture guru of history, they separated because Jack went this way and Dad came back, and he wanted to start working again. So he went to work at, I think, I'm trying to remember if Republic was still there, but he went to work for Review, I believe, but later on, which was over at Universal. But the serials had basically ended, and they were doing the major features where he started doing Rex Allen's, and he did some more Rogers. And I think that's when he started doing the Roy Rogers. But there again, I shouldn't be talking about that because that's the other history, and which I'm not real good at. But they just kind of went their separate ways because there were no two-director serials going on.
What was your dad's relationship like with Herbert Yates?
There's been a lot of things said about Mr. Yates, and he was always very nice to me. And Dad, I think, got along with Yates. And yeah, there were some problems and a little standoffish about contracts and stuff like that. But I think that he got along pretty good with him. Otherwise, I don't think that he would have lasted. You know.
Was your dad given a lot of freedom at Republic to do what he wanted, or did he still have to follow what the higher-ups wanted him to do? How much freedom did he have?
Well, freedom came with if you produced and if they liked you. He had to fight every inch of the way, and I think all the directors had to fight every inch of the way. Even the actors had to fight every inch of the way. I don't think producing today has changed much, to be honest with you, from what I see out there. It's still, you're fighting the producers on budgets, you're fighting the producers on who you hire, and so on and so forth. So as far as a lot of freedom goes, I don't think Dad's freedom came when he was out shooting, and especially on location. That's where he had the freedom. Because they would let him do what he wanted to do because they knew that he could do it quickly and get good results.
What about on TV? Was he able to make the TV shows his own? Was he given any freedom there? Because if you look at some of these shows, the entire run, they all kind of have the same feel to them regardless of what the show is. So was he given any room to put his own flavor on anything he worked on TV-wise?
I'm going to say no. And the reason that I say no is because when you shoot a TV script, you basically have to stay to the script, and especially nowadays because the writers have got so much control over things that you don't have that freedom you had back in my dad's day. But even at that, the freedom back there was not that much. You still stuck to the script, and you would have to fight to get what you wanted. It's not like some of the directors today. Of course, TV is TV. You follow the script, you do the script, get the best results out of your actors as you can, and that's it. It's when you start shooting the movies and you get a name. Of course, Quentin Tarantino. I mean, he's got full reign of what he wants to do because he's been so successful at it, and so I really believe that they stuck to a script back then too.
Now, maybe you know this or maybe you don't know this, but what's your dad's philosophy on filmmaking? Action.
Make it interesting. Tell a good story. Trying to get the best out of the story. I can't really say he had a philosophy. He came home, he'd read the script, and off he'd go. And in the mornings I used to write. When I was working with him, or even when I used to write in with him when I was a kid, he wouldn't say a word. He was thinking the whole time of what he was going to doing the setups and where he was going to do the setups and so on and so forth. You follow the script.
What do you think your father would think of filmmaking today?
Oh boy, I can tell you right now. He'd tell you it was a bunch of crap.
Right.
Excuse me, but that's my dad. That's my dad. I would say that the majority of the stuff on TV today, he'd look at it and go, "Oh, geez, that's a bunch of crap."
Right.
So, but you'd have to know my dad to understand what he was talking about, and that's all I'm going to say about that.
Okay. I think I know the answer to this next question, but I'll ask it anyways. CGI. It seems like everything nowadays when it comes to action is all computerized, and nothing really is being done like the way he did it back when he was making some of this stuff. When they did all these stunts, they actually did them. It wasn't in front of a green screen and all this stuff. So what would you think?
That's correct. And you hit the nail right on the head, my friend, when you said that. He would not like CGI at all.
Okay, I thought so, but I just had to make sure, because
I can tell you that. As a matter of fact, when I'm trying to remember an incident when just recently before he passed away that we were talking about that, and he says, "Oh, for God's sakes, they're doing this all, doing this way and this way." It's and again, he'd say it's a bunch of crap. So,
tell me about the Lightning Rides Again.
Well, the Lightning Rides Again is a story that I, going through my dad's memorabilia and stuff like that. There's some stories that he wrote. One of them I've already produced. The Lightning Rides Again was a story idea about a serial, and I'm not going to tell you too much about it because we're still working on it. But it's a serial idea to try and bring back the serial, and I've teamed up with Bill Winkler, who's a son of actually an old serial star, Bobby Winkler, and worked with my dad, and we just happened to connect, and he thought this idea was great, and so we're trying to get the funds to produce this serial. So that's where that goes. We did try. We quickly tried a Kickstarter campaign, failed miserably. So that's all I'll say about that. But it's a serial idea.
Well, if it ever gets made, can I be in it? I can ride, I can act, I can
Absolutely.
do it all.
I'll put you on my list.
Okay, I don't buy that, but
no. Don't say that. Bill's probably going to listen to this interview.
Okay.
I'm doing some voiceover work for him next week, and I'll talk to him about it. But we got to find the money first. He's busy working on some projects of his right now. He's right in the midst of doing a voiceover for a big cartoon, anime cartoon.
Okay, because I could see myself as like a henchman to the bad guy, one of those.
Hey, you're on.
Those guys, yeah, I could see myself.
You're on. We've talked about it. We've talked about different budgets for it, and the problem is that you need, and I'm not going to get into the logistics of it. I feel we need about $100,000 to do this, and that's not a heck of a lot of money. We want to do it right. If we did it any cheaper, we could do it cheaper, but I just don't feel that we could do it right. So it's still on the chopping block. Hasn't been chopped up yet. So we're still working on it. We're probably going to in the next during the summer we're going to be back at it again to see what we can do with it.
One last thing about the Lightning Rides Again. When exactly did your father write this? Was this during the time that he was working at Republic and he wrote this and tried to pitch it to the guys at Republic and they turned him down? Or was this something where he wrote this later in life? When exactly did he write the Lightning Rides Again?
Well, I think sometime in the 70s.
Okay.
He wrote this idea. It's about 4 or 5 pages. Actually, no more than that. It's 12 pages of the story idea, the whole complete story. It doesn't have dialogue and stuff to it. And it just remained in a box here with a lot of his memorabilia, and I dug across it, and I first looked at it, and I thought, oh, that was pretty good, and I just put it aside, and then I was pitching some other story ideas to Bill that I'm working on, and I took it to him, and I said, here's another thing to look at, and I no sooner get home, and he calls me up. He says, "Wow, this is great. We ought to do this." So, it was just a story sitting in a box, basically.
Now, you bring up memorabilia. What kind of stuff does your dad have?
I have a lot of old scripts that he had shot, and some that he hadn't. He did have a couple of stories that he wrote that he tried to get published. One of them was Yaki, which I have published now, and it's out on Amazon. Another one I'm just on the heels of doing, just trying to design a cover for, and it's called Deadly is the Winter. And it's a beautiful little story about a boy growing up in 1800s Montana. And it's an actual story of Post Parks, who was the six-up driver in all of those westerns. Posty was he drove a lot of the wagons and was a stuntman, an actor. And he told a story to my dad one day, and my dad wrote it down, and he wrote it, and he tried to sell it to Disney at one time, but, the Disney came back and said, we've got too many of these My Friend Flicka stories, and I've resurrected it, and we're gonna publish it here pretty soon.
Does your dad have any footage? Does he have any film of some of the stuff that he made? Does he have any deleted scenes? Because obviously there had to be something lined up on the cutting room floor when they were making these serials that, for time constraints, or they just didn't like the way it looked. There has to be some deleted scenes somewhere. Does he have any of them? Does he have any film from some of the stuff he made?
There's no memorabilia like that. There's a couple of other projects, some old 16mm film I've got. But directors didn't back then, because everything was film, nobody kept anything like that.
Okay. I was just curious about that, because one serial that he made, The Lone Ranger in 1938, that's been lost forever. I mean, obviously, Serial Squadron, they made a great...
Eric Stedman did a great job on that. He actually sent me a copy, and he did a good job of resurrecting it. That's a great story.
Yeah.
And he shot that in Lone Pine, California, and a lot of his memorabilia is at the Lone Pine Film History Museum, which is now the Western Film History Museum. It just got deemed, I guess they're going to house a lot of the old Western memorabilia, as far as motion pictures go.
The reason I brought up the film was I was hoping that maybe like your dad kept around, like maybe he was able to get one of the reels, but obviously if it was back then, it was probably just one, and now there's...
I remember him saying, he says, "Can you believe that they destroyed that original negative?"
Yeah.
It can't be found. I vaguely remember him talking about that before he passed.
Now, I'm just curious, maybe you know and maybe you don't know, because he gets a credit for directing Hi-O Silver, which is the feature version of The Lone Ranger. It's edited up, and there's some new scenes in that. It's just a little boy and an older man and Silver.
Right, I've seen it, right.
Yes,
I've seen that.
Did he shoot that? Did he shoot those scenes? Obviously, he shot the majority of the movie because it's just taken from the serial, but did he...
I don't know the answer to that question. I know that they shot a lot of that in Lone Pine, and I know that, he obviously did a lot. Of course, Jack was there too, so... a funny story about how he got to shoot that scene of where the Lone Ranger becomes a Lone Ranger, where they had the big gun battle, and
right, the ambush.
The ambush. That was the first scene that they shot, and for the serial at Lone Pine, and Jack was originally supposed to shoot it, but he woke up and he had the touristies, so. He said to Dad, he says, he says, "I can't go out there." He says, "Would you mind shooting this?" And that's how Dad ended up shooting that scene.
Right.
So,
but that's a great serial. How about The Lone Ranger Rides Again? Are you familiar with that? That was restored by Serial Squadron before The Lone Ranger. They put out a great DVD. Have you seen that one? It's with Robert Livingston as the Lone Ranger.
Yeah.
What do you think about that one? I don't think it's as good as the first.
No, you know what? The one that Eric did, and I just seen it recently too, because I'm familiar with the one with the boy and the boy talking to the old guy.
Right.
That's the one that I remember seeing here a couple of years ago, and then Eric did this one, and it's a lot. I think the original's a lot better. That's my personal opinion. And I think a lot of people agree with me on it.
Right.
The original was the best.
It's got a great story, and especially with them shooting in Lone Pine, Lone Pine, it's God's country, that's what I like to call it, and it adds so much production value to the serial, and in The Lone Ranger Rides Again, it's missing something, and sadly, it's not as good as the first one. I'm just curious, does your dad have posters or lobby cards of any of the serials that he did?
Yeah, we do. I've got, as a matter of fact, I'm looking at here in my little office. I've got the SOS Coast Guard poster and the Outcast and Stranger at My Door and Santa Fe Passage, some poster cards, and I've got some in a box somewhere. But I think today there's quite a few people that have those.
Mm-hmm. Now, when he was making these serials, was he able to go to the theater, sit down, and watch them, or was he so busy cranking them out that he didn't have time to do that?
Oh, no, he never went. I don't ever remember my dad going to a theater and watching. I mean, they'd go in, and by the time they were through cutting this thing, I don't think they even wanted to see it again. They just wanted to go next door to the bar and have a drink. Oh. No, I don't remember my dad ever going to a theater to watch any of the shows.
Oh, I see. Just a couple more questions before I let you go, Jay Dee, and I really appreciate you being so generous with your time. I know this has been a very long interview, but obviously in the beginning of the interview, when I was doing the intro, I said, legendary director. What do you think your dad more so is? Is he more of a legend or more of a pioneer in filmmaking? Because obviously you said earlier that at one point in time, he didn't think that what he was making was all that great, but obviously guys like George Lucas and Quentin Tarantino and Steven Spielberg have really adopted some of the methods that he used over his career, and obviously those are all great directors. So what is he more? Is he more of a legend, or is he more of a pioneer?
Well, he was a pioneer at first, and then he became a legend. And I have to thank Quentin Tarantino for being a fan of my father's, because he's made him a legend. Although he was a legend in his own right before he was recognized by Quentin. But so my answer to the question is both. He was a pioneer, and later on has become a legend.
Last question: what's your father's legacy?
Action.
Perfect answer. Jay Dee, I really, really appreciate you taking the time to talk. I know it's been a very long interview, but I'm absolutely just such a big fan of your dad's work and all the great stuff that he did. And, I put him on the Zorro Mount Rushmore. Like, if there were 4 heads of who should be on a Zorro Mount Rushmore, your dad has to be one of those heads. People remember him for Zorro Rides Again and Zorro's Fighting Legion, but he worked with Guy Williams a lot on Disney's Zorro, so he's and the stories that he told on the serials are some of my all-time favorites, regardless of genre, regardless of time. I absolutely love Zorro Rides Again and Zorro's Fighting Legion, so this has been really an honor to speak with you and talk about his career. So thank you for taking the time to talk. I really appreciate it.
Well, Mike, thank you very much, and thank you for being a fan of my father's. I really appreciate it.